I reached park under a sky the color of ash. Clouds clung to the mountains like torn fabric, streaks of snow cutting sharp white scars across the slopes. The highway leading into the park felt abandoned, as if I was driving into a place the world had quietly decided to forget. The wooden sign at the entrance leaned to one side. The paint blistered and flaking, half the letters scraped into deep grooves. I slowed as I passed, noticing claw marks etched straight through the park's name. A ranger stood in the gatehouse. He didn't smile, didn't wave. His eyes were shadowed by a smoky bear hat pulled low, his lips cracked and pale. He motioned for me to lower my window. I handed him the entrance fee, expecting a routine greeting. But he didn't let go of the bills immediately. His grip tightened just enough to make me look at him. His voice dropped to a gravelly whisper, "Be out before dark." I half smiled, waiting for him to crack a grin, but his expression never changed. His eyes stayed fixed on mine, unblinking. The forest swallowed the light faster than I expected. Towering Douglas firs rose like walls on both sides of the road, their branches knitting together overhead until the sky disappeared completely. I switched on my headlights, but the beams felt weak, like they were being smothered before they could reach more than a few yards ahead. Something whispered in the trees. It wasn't wind, it wasn't wildlife. It was the sound of many voices, warped and low, all speaking at once, just beyond hearing. I pressed my foot harder on the gas. Half an hour later, I pulled into the lot near the trailhead for Hidden Lake. The air was heavy with the scent of pine sap and something darker underneath, a wet, sour smell like rotting leaves buried too long. Far down the path, I saw 3 hikers leaving the trail, 2 middle-aged men and a younger woman. They wore thick jackets, hoods drawn, each carrying a walking stick. They stopped when they saw me. They didn't wave. They didn't speak. They just stood, perfectly still, watching me like I was the only unnatural thing they had ever seen. I turned away to grab my pack from the back seat. I heard footsteps behind me. When I looked, the hikers were gone. The weight in the air grew heavier as I stepped onto the trail. The deeper I walked, the stranger the trees became. Their bark had turned the color of bone, warped into unnatural twists. Their surfaces carved with markings that weren't letters, weren't symbols. The longer I looked, the more the shapes shifted, as if the wood itself was breathing. A sound made me freeze. Off to my right, a moose stood among the trees, its antlers heavy, its head turning slowly to follow my steps. Its neck rotated too, far vertebrae cracking like wet sticks. I looked away, heart pounding, only to see the same moose standing on the trail ahead of me. This time, strips of fabric hung from its antlers, dark cloth torn into ragged ribbons. I stepped back, and the ground beneath my boot gave slightly, softer than dirt. I looked down and saw a thin layer of soil stretched over something that didn't belong. I crouched and brushed it aside, revealing a thick winter coat, half buried and rotting. Inside the coat was a rib cage, still intact. The footsteps came again, this time closer, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't turn around right away. The sound behind me wasn't steady footsteps. It was heavier, dragging, like something was being pulled across the ground. My breath tightened in my chest, and I told myself to keep walking, slow and steady, until I reached the fork in the trail. When I finally turned my head, the trail behind me was empty, but the sound hadn't stopped. It was above me now. I tilted my gaze upward, and my throat went dry. There, clinging to the side of a Douglas fir, 30 feet up, was a man. At least I thought it was a man. His limbs were wrong, arms too long, joints bent in directions they shouldn't. His head was pressed flat against the bark, face hidden, body trembling with a faint, rapid twitching. His fingers dug deep into the wood, nails sinking like roots. I stepped back. The figure's head snapped toward me in a sudden whip-crack motion. Its face was pale, raw, as if it had been scraped clean of skin, leaving only sinew. Two black eyes bulged forward, fixed on me without a blink. I ran. The trail seemed to twist under my boots, bending away from where I knew the lot should have been. The markings on the trees grew thicker, deeper. Every few steps, I thought I heard voices behind me, the voices from earlier, overlapping, speaking faster now, as if arguing over something. Then I heard my name. I stopped dead. The voice was behind me, low, familiar, warm. My father's voice. He had been dead for 5 years. I turned slowly. Between the trees, I saw a shadow step forward. My father's outline. The same height, the same slope of shoulders. His parka was the one he wore the last winter I saw him, but where his face should have been, there was only smooth, stretched skin. It tilted its head. The skin rippled, as though something underneath was pressing against it, trying to get out. I stumbled backward, then turned and bolted off the path entirely, crashing through brush, desperate to put distance between myself and the thing wearing my father's body. Branches tore at my jacket, roots snagged my boots, but I didn't stop until the trees abruptly opened into a clearing, and that's when I saw it. A cabin stood alone, its roof sagging, timbers gray with rot. One window stared blankly toward me, its glass covered in a dark film from the inside. A chimney leaned at an angle like a broken bone. Relief flickered for half a second. Maybe someone could help me. Then I noticed the trail of footprints in the dirt leading to the door. Dozens of them, bare footprints, all of them pointing inside. I reached the porch and heard a sound from within. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't breathing. It was the sound of nails scratching. Wood slow, deliberate. The scratching stopped the moment my hand touched the cabin door. Silence spread outward, like a ripple, thick and unnatural, pressing against my ears until I could hear my own pulse. I hesitated, every instinct telling me to turn back. But my legs moved anyway. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the air was heavy, humid, smelling faintly of mildew and something metallic. The cabin's interior was smaller than it looked. From outside, a single room. Dust drifted through the dim light that leaked in from the window, thick enough that every beam looked solid. The footprints I'd seen outside covered the floorboards here too. Circling the room, I took a step forward, and the wood groaned beneath me. Something groaned back. It came from beneath the floor. I froze. The sound was low and wet, like the earth itself was breathing. The boards shifted slightly under my boots, as if something was pushing up from underneath. Then came a whisper. It was right at my ear, though there was no one behind me. A voice I didn't recognize, speaking a language that sounded like it had been dragged across stone. The cabin door slammed shut. I spun around, but the doorway was empty. My own reflection stared back at me from the window pane beside the door. Only the reflection wasn't moving the way I was. It smiled. I backed away toward the far wall, my shoulders brushing against something hanging there. My fingers touched fabric, coarse, rough. I turned and saw coats. Dozens of them, heavy winter parkas, all hanging in a neat row. Every single one of them was identical to mine. The scratching started again, not from the floor this time, from the coats. They were swaying gently on their hooks, though there was no wind, no movement in the air. A single sleeve began to rise. I bolted for the door, yanking it open so hard the wood splintered around the hinges. Outside, the clearing had changed. The forest was closer now. The trees leaned inward, their trunks warped, their bark still marked with those shifting carvings. But there was no trail, no sign of where I had come from. And then I heard the voice again, my father's voice, only this time it wasn't behind me. It was coming from inside the cabin. The voice from inside the cabin spoke my name again. This time, it was perfect. Not just my father's voice, the cadence, the slight rasp at the end of certain words. My breath caught in my chest. Then it changed. The tone cracked, deepened. twisting into something far too low to belong to any human throat. The syllables dragged like iron chains scraping against stone. The window shattered from the inside. I stumbled back, glass crunching under my boots, and that was when I realized the clearing wasn't still anymore. The trees were closer. No, not just closer. They were moving. Each time I blinked, the trunks shifted a little more inward, the circle tightening. The markings on the bark twisted like living veins, black sap leaking and running in crooked lines down to the roots, A shadows. At first, I thought it was a trick of the branches, until I saw it step forward. It was tall, too tall, its head brushing the lowest limbs. Its body was covered in something that looked like shredded bark and strips of dark matted fur. In its chest, embedded deep, like a grotesque ornament, was a ranger badge. It began to move toward me, its steps completely silent, each one shortening the distance between us with unnatural speed. Behind me, the cabin door creaked open again. Something inside was breathing heavily now, the air in the doorway shimmering as if from heat, though the cold around me bit through my jacket. A figure stood in the darkness, its outline almost exactly my own. It raised its head. The face was mine, only the eyes were wrong, flat, colorless, reflecting nothing. My heart slammed against my ribs. The creature in the trees was almost at the edge of the clearing. The thing in the doorway stepped forward, one bare foot planting on the porch. I turned in a circle, searching desperately for any way out. The trees had closed in almost entirely, their branches knitting together overhead until the clearing was trapped in a dome of black limbs. There was nowhere left to run. The cabin thing reached out its hand toward me. The forest thing crouched, its long limbs coiling like springs, and for the first time since I entered Glacier, I understood the ranger's warning. I wasn't going to make it out before dark. The forest creature sprang. I threw myself sideways, my shoulder slamming into the cabin wall as the thing's claws raked the dirt where I'd been standing. The impact shook the ground, the smell of damp earth and something rancid filling the air. The cabin figure stepped fully into the clearing. It moved like water, its motions unnervingly smooth. My own face staring back at me with that same blank, lifeless gaze. Its arm extended again, and when it spoke, it was my own voice that came out. "Come back." The trees groaned, literally groaned, their trunks flexing like muscles, bark splitting to reveal wet, pulsing fibers beneath. The circle was almost completely closed now. I bolted toward the narrowest gap I could see between two trunks. But the moment I got close, the bark twisted inward, forming something like ribs, sealing the space. The cabin thing was closer now. Its mouth began to open wider than any jaw should, the sound of splitting tendons filling the clearing. Behind it, inside the doorway, I saw something glowing faintly, a pale green light. A memory stirred in the back of my mind, sharp and sudden. My father, years ago, warning me about certain places in certain parks. The way he said some trails weren't meant for hikers at all. They were meant to bring things out. The glow grew brighter, filling the doorway, outlining the cabin figure from behind. That was when I noticed something. The ranger badge in the chest of the forest creature. It was the same name as my father's. The thing in the trees turned its head toward me, and for just a second, its eyes weren't hollow black pits. They were his eyes, and he wasn't trying to kill me. He was trying to keep me from leaving. The cabin thing lunged. The forest erupted in motion, and the last thing I remember before the clearing went black was my father's voice. Not a warning this time, but a command, shouted in a tone I hadn't heard since I was a child. "Stay inside the park." I woke to the sound of water, not a stream, not rain. It was heavier, deeper, like the slow churn of something moving far below me. I was lying on a wooden floor, not the cabin floor. This one was smoother, newer, polished to a shine that reflected faint points of pale green light above. I sat up. The room was long, narrow, lined with wooden beams that curved inward like the inside of a ship's hull. Strange carvings ran along every support, the same shifting shapes I'd seen on the trees, only now I could almost recognize them. Names, hundreds of them. Every few beams, one of the names was crossed out. I stood, and my boots echoed on the floor. That was when I realized the floor wasn't wood at all. It was bone. The green glow grew stronger at the far end of the room. I moved toward it, each step making the air heavier, harder to breathe. My chest tightened, my vision narrowing as the light grew brighter. When I reached the end of the room, I saw it. A massive root system twisted down through a hole in the ceiling, glowing faintly with that same sickly green light. The roots pulsed like veins, and tangled within them were objects, pieces of clothing, bits of metal, ranger badges, hiking boots, and faces, half-formed, pale faces pressed against the roots from inside, mouths moving silently as if trying to speak. I stepped closer and froze when I saw one face in particular, my father. His eyes snapped open. "Leave now." The roots shuddered. The whole room shook, dust falling from above. The green light pulsed faster, brighter, the roots tightening like they were bracing for something to break free. A deep sound rolled up from below. It wasn't a voice. It was older, deeper, the kind of sound that made my teeth ache and my bones vibrate. The beams of the room groaned and began to split. The crossed-out names glowed faintly, one after another, until my father's name burned brighter than all of them. The sound came again, this time closer, and then I realized the water sound I'd heard when I woke up wasn't water. It was breathing. Something beneath Glacier was waking up. The sound grew louder until it was no longer sound, it was pressure. Every inhale made the floor flex upward, the bone-like surface groaning under my boots. Every exhale sent a wave of cold air through the beams, rattling the carved names. My father's face in the roots twisted in pain. His lips moved again, but this time there was no sound, only the green light spilling from his open mouth. The roots above me split with a sharp crack. Something black and slick slid through the opening, coiling slowly toward the floor. It wasn't a root, it was a hand. Long, skeletal fingers gripped the beam, each nail so dark it seemed to swallow the light. Around it, a second hand followed, then the suggestion of a head. Whatever was forcing its way through wasn't shaped right. Its head pressed against the opening like it was trying to squeeze through a space too small for it. Skin stretched and tore along, invisible seams, leaking more of that pale green glow. The breathing became words, not words. I understood, but my name was among them. The root holding my father began to split. His face distorted as the wood fibers cracked. I could see his chest now. His arms pressed tight against the inside as if he'd been buried alive in the root system. "Leave now." The creature's head snapped toward me. It had no eyes, but I felt its attention hit me like weight. The green light dimmed, then surged brighter than ever. My father's voice became urgent, desperate. "Run." The roots around him tightened like they were resisting. His face was sinking deeper into the wood, his features dissolving into the grain. The creature reached a hand toward me, not to grab, to offer. I looked back at my father. His face was almost gone, his voice barely a whisper. It was then I understood. Someone had to take the place. The breathing shook the room again. The root split wider. The offer hung in the air, the thing's hand waiting, patient. If I took it, the park would let me go. If I didn't, I wasn't leaving at all. I did not take the hand. Every instinct screamed at me to grab it, to accept whatever deal the thing was offering. But the moment my fingers twitched toward it, I saw my father's eyes. Not pleading, warning. The glow around his face surged, burning brighter as the root system convulsed. The creature's hand froze in the air, waiting, patient, unshaking. I stepped back, unshaking. I stepped back. The thing's heavily, impossibly far to one side, until the split seams in its skin stretched wide, enough to drip glowing sap onto the bone floor. The breathing changed. It wasn't slow anymore. It was fast, hungry. The room shuddered. The carved names on the beams began to burn one by one, glowing white hot, until each letter peeled away and fell to the ground like ash. The walls buckled inward, the space collapsing. My father's face was almost gone, sinking deeper into the roots, his voice breaking apart. "Run." I turned and bolted. The floor shifted under me, as if I were running across something alive. The bone surface cracking, gaps opening to reveal the same green light churning beneath. Hands, too many hands, reached out of the gaps, grasping at my boots, clawing at my jacket. I stumbled through the hallway of collapsing beams, the crossed out names flaring white hot as I passed. The sound of the breathing followed me, but now it was everywhere, above, below, inside my head. A wall split open ahead of me, revealing the forest. Only it wasn't the forest I remembered. The trees leaned at impossible angles, their roots writhing like worms in the dirt. The sky above was black, the stars shifting as though trying to rearrange themselves. The trail was gone, and then I realized the forest was moving, not closing in like before. Chasing me, the ground heaved as roots tore free of the soil, trees dragging themselves forward like hunters, each step pounding like a heartbeat. The breathing roared behind me, shaking the earth. The air tasted of iron and rot. I ran into the dark. Somewhere behind me, the creature laughed, not loud, but deep, echoing from the ground itself. It wasn't angry I had refused. It was excited. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like lead, but the forest did not fall behind. The trees moved faster now. Each time I looked over my shoulder, their trunks had shifted closer, branches stretching like arms trying to pull me back. Roots burst from the ground in front of me, forcing me to leap or swerve just to keep my footing. The breathing followed, deeper now, resonating from the ground beneath my boots. Then the ground dropped out from under me. I hit the slope hard, sliding on my side through loose dirt and roots. My hands clawed for purchase, but everything I grabbed tore away. I slammed into the base of a massive fallen tree. The air knocked out of me. I staggered to my feet and froze. The clearing I had tumbled into was not natural. The trees here formed a perfect circle, their trunks smooth and pale, no carvings, no bark. In the center, the earth bulged upward into a mound, and on top of it sat something that did not belong in any forest. A door. It was old, heavy, its surface covered in metal plates etched with the same shifting symbols I had seen in the cabin. But this time, the marks were glowing faintly, almost like veins carrying that same pale green light I had seen beneath the roots. The breathing changed again. It wasn't coming from behind me. Now it was coming from beneath the door. My pulse thundered in my ears. I should have turned and run, but my body moved forward, almost against my will. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of wet earth and iron. As I reached the mound, I saw something else. The edge of the doorframe was carved with names, not hundreds like before, just a few. I saw my father's name, crossed out, and beneath it, in jagged fresh cuts, my own name, not crossed out. The ground trembled. The door groaned, its metal plates straining against something pushing from below. Roots began to coil around the edges, tightening like locks. The breathing grew faster, louder, and then I understood. This wasn't just a way out. It was the heart of the park, and whatever was under it wanted me to open the door. I stepped back. From the door, the metal plates throbbed faintly, as if something beneath them had a pulse. Each vibration sent ripples through the pale wood of the trees surrounding the clearing. I didn't touch it. The breathing deepened, the sound rolling out like a warning. The air grew colder, sharp enough to sting my throat with every breath. Then, the ground moved. The mound swelled beneath the door, lifting it higher, as if something was pressing upward from underneath. The roots coiled tighter around the frame, twitching like muscles. I stumbled back further. The trees reacted instantly. Their trunks shifted, bending forward until their smooth pale bark cracked. Black liquid seeped from the fissures, sizzling when it hit the ground. Branches shot downward, long and thin, wrapping around my shoulders, my arms, my legs. The forest was pulling me toward the door. I dug my boots into the dirt, grabbing at the roots for leverage, but the branches tightened, the wood creaking under the strain. The breathing became a steady rhythm, matching the pull of the branches. Inhale, drag, exhale. Tighten. The metal plates on the door glowed brighter. My name pulsed in the carvings, each letter flaring with light that burned my eyes. The mound shifted again. This time, a sound came from beneath the door. Not just breathing, a voice. It didn't speak words, but the tone was unmistakable, coaxing, promising. My mind felt thick, like something was pushing into it, trying to make me take a step forward. I wrenched one arm free and grabbed a jagged rock from the dirt, swinging at the branch around my chest. The wood shrieked, splintering under the impact. I stumbled forward, closer to the door than I had been before. The voice grew louder. The glow from the carvings turned white-hot. And then I realized the door wasn't just waiting for me to open. It was going to open itself. The ground beneath the mound lurched upward. The metal plates shrieked, splitting along jagged seams, each glowing vein of green light tearing wider. The roots wrapped around the edges convulsed as if they were holding something back, their fibers straining like pulled tendons. The voice grew clearer. It was speaking now, not in a language I knew, but every syllable pressed into my skull like a hot iron, twisting my thoughts until the sound almost became words I could understand. My name was hidden in every sentence, pulled apart, reshaped, repeated. The trees in the circle bent inward, their pale trunks trembling. Branches scraped the air in unison, the sound like bone dragged over stone. A sharp crack split the clearing. The door moved, only an inch at first, just enough for air to rush out. It hit me in a wave so cold it felt solid, a blast of rot and wet earth mixed with something faintly metallic. My lungs seized, my vision spotted with bursts of green light. Then I heard it. Not the breathing, not the voice, a sound deeper than both. Something shifting its weight. My pulse pounded so hard it hurt. I forced myself forward a single step, drawn toward the gap without meaning to look, but I couldn't stop. Through the narrow opening, I saw movement. At first I thought it was water, thick and black, rolling in slow currents beneath the door. Then it rose higher, and I realized it wasn't water. It was something moving in layers, skin that wasn't skin, folding over itself like liquid muscle. The voice surged again. My vision blurred, and then something pressed against the gap. A single eye. It wasn't shaped like any animal I'd seen. Too wide, too flat, its surface rippling faintly as if it weren't solid. Inside it, shapes shifted: stars, trees, mountains moving too fast to follow. It looked at me, not through me, at me. And I understood, in that moment, this wasn't something trapped, it was something waiting. The door shifted another inch. The roots screamed. The roots tightened around the doorframe, groaning under the strain. Each one bled pale green, light from deep splits along its length. The eye in the gap didn't blink. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It waited, urged again, its tone shifting. It was no longer coaxing. It was calling. The branches around my legs and chest tightened, pulling me forward. My boots dragged through the dirt, leaving long gouges as I fought to stay back. The trees leaned lower, their pale bark cracking open wider, black sap dripping in thick ropes to the ground. The door moved another inch. I heard something slide against the inside, not footsteps, not claws. Something heavier, dragging its weight across the bone floor beneath the mound. My father's name burned in the carvings, again then mine. The roots convulsed. One of them shot forward, wrapping around my wrist. My arm jerked upward toward the door, the glow crawling up my skin in pulses. My fingers twitched. I wasn't resisting anymore. Not because I had given up, because I couldn't move. The voice shifted again. Now it was inside my head, louder than my thoughts, louder than the forest. The ground beneath the clearing heaved. The trees groaned as their roots tore free, writhing in the dirt. The pale trunks bent low enough that their tops scraped the edge of the mound, like they were bowing toward the door. The eye in the gap widened, and then everything stopped. The breathing ceased. The branches froze. The roots slackened just enough for me to feel the blood rush back into my hands. The voice went silent. I realized then that the park wasn't waiting for me to decide. It had already decided. The door slammed shut with a force that rattled the earth. Every root snapped tight around it like chains, the green light bleeding away until only faint traces remained. The branches released me all at once. I dropped to my knees, gasping, my vision swimming. The circle of trees straightened. The clearing was silent again. But in the silence, I heard something new. A heartbeat, not mine, beneath the ground, closer than before. The heartbeat didn't fade. It followed me. I staggered to my feet, every muscle trembling. The clearing was still. The trees were still. But the air pressed heavy against my chest, thick enough that each breath felt stolen. I turned toward the slope I'd tumbled down earlier, ready to climb back up, but the ground shifted beneath me. It didn't shake like before. It sank. The dirt crumbled under my boots, pulling me downward. I scrambled, clawing at roots, but they slithered out of my grip like living things. The pale trunks of the surrounding trees leaned inward, their bases tilting, as if watching me fall. The mound in the center of the clearing didn't move, but the earth around it opened. The roots parted like curtains, revealing a black hollow beneath the surface. The air that poured out was colder than ice, heavy with a smell that turned my stomach, wet soil, iron, and something faintly sweet, like rotting flowers. I hit the slope hard again, sliding deeper. My boots scraped against something that wasn't. Stone, bone, a floor of it. I landed on my side, the breath knocked out of me. The chamber was enormous, the ceiling a tangled mass of roots that twitched faintly like the tendons of something sleeping. Pale ribs of wood or bone arched overhead, curving inward as if the whole place was inside a gigantic cage. The heartbeat was louder here, and there was something else. In the far corner of the chamber, half buried in the roots, stood a second door. It was smaller than the one above, older. The metal plates rusted, the carvings nearly worn away, but it was breathing. The surface expanded and contracted in time with the heartbeat. I staggered toward it without meaning to, my boots crunching, bone with every step. Halfway there, I saw the marks on the floor, not scratches, not carvings, footprints, hundreds of them, some small like a child's, others far too large to be human. They all led to the door. None came back. The roots above shifted, dust sifting down. The heartbeat thundered. The smaller door exhaled. The door's surface pulsed with the heartbeat. Every breath it exhaled sent another wave of cold air across the chamber, each one sharper than the last. I should have turned back, but my feet moved forward anyway. The closer I came, the more the air thickened, heavy enough to make my steps slow. The smell of rot deepened until it burned my throat. The door inhaled. The sound dragged at my bones, pulling me closer. My hand rose on its own, fingers brushing the rusted metal. It was warm. The heartbeat surged. The door opened. No sound, no grinding of metal or tearing of roots. It simply parted, the rust flaking away into the air like dust. What lay beyond wasn't darkness, it was light. A pale green glow stretched endlessly, so bright it hurt to look at. The air inside was still, almost silent, almost beneath the hum of the glow. I heard whispers, not one voice, thousands, every name I had ever heard, and names I didn't know. The floor beyond the door wasn't bone or stone. It was something soft, giving slightly under my boots. When I looked down, I realized it wasn't floor at all. It was fabric, cloth, clothing, coats, shirts, pants, shoes, layer upon layer of them, stacked until they made a solid surface that stretched into the distance. I took another step, and the whispers grew louder. The glow shifted shapes, began to move in the distance, tall, thin silhouettes that bent at strange angles, their heads tilting sharply to follow me. None of them had faces. The whispers merged into one sound, breathing. The light ahead bent, curving upward into an arch. It wasn't another door. It was a mouth. I stopped just short of the arch. Up close, the glow wasn't steady anymore. It pulsed in slow waves, the same rhythm as the heartbeat I'd been hearing since the clearing. The fabric beneath my boots shifted faintly, as though something moved just beneath the surface. The silhouettes in the distance tilted their heads further, their limbs bending in ways that made my stomach turn, their faceless heads all angled toward the arch, toward me. The whispers surged again, but now they were louder than my own thoughts. My name was buried in every sentence. Each time I heard it, my chest tightened. The arch exhaled. The wind that rushed out was warm and damp. The smell was stronger. Now earth, rot, and something coppery. I took half a step back. The ground shifted. The fabric beneath my boots rippled, layers of clothing moving like something alive. The sleeves tightened around my ankles. I kicked, tearing free, stumbling, closer to the arch in the process. The silhouettes in the distance began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, their limbs jerking as though pulled by invisible strings. I turned to run back toward the second door. It was gone. In its place was only more fabric, stretching endlessly in every direction. The mouth exhaled again, stronger this time. My body pitched forward, my boots sliding across the surface. The arch loomed closer. The heartbeat thundered. The silhouettes broke into a run. A sleeve wrapped around my wrist. Another coiled around my boot. The fabric yanked, sending me sprawling forward. My hands sank into the layers of clothing, my fingers brushing something cold and hard beneath. The mouth inhaled. The pull was irresistible. I screamed, but the sound was lost under the roar of air as I was dragged into the glow. The last thing I felt before crossing the arch was the fabric tightening around my chest, almost like it was hugging me. Then the world vanished. There was no ground, no sky, only light. The pale green glow stretched in every direction, but it wasn't empty. Shapes drifted in the distance, rising and falling slowly, their outlines bending, like reflections in moving water. I floated, or fell. It was impossible to tell. My body felt weightless, my stomach twisting with the sensation of motion that never seemed to end. The whispers were louder here. I turned my head, searching for a source, but the sound came from everywhere. My name, my father's name, names I'd never heard, they layered over one another. A constant murmur that seemed to press against my skin. Something brushed my shoulder. I jerked away, spinning in the endless glow. There was nothing, no. There was something, closer now. A figure, it hung in the light. Tall and impossibly thin, its limbs longer than they should be. Its faceless head tilted toward me, the surface rippling faintly as if something beneath the skin was moving. I tried to move backward, but there was no backward. The light itself seemed to press in, guiding me closer. More figures appeared in the distance. Dozens. Hundreds, all facing me, all tilting their heads in unison. The glow pulsed. The glow pulsed. The heart loud, it made my teeth ache, and then I felt it. Something beneath me, not solid ground, a shape large, alive. It moved, and the entire space shifted with it. The light bent, the silhouettes leaning in, as if pulled by the motion. The whispers grew sharper. The glow ahead began to warp. twisting into another shape. An opening, not an exit. Another mouth. The glow twisted tighter, the edges of the second mouth curling inward. I floated in place, or maybe I was suspended. I couldn't feel my body anymore. My limbs felt heavy and light all at once, like they belonged to someone else. The silhouettes tilted their heads farther, the movement perfectly synchronized. The rippling in their faceless surfaces deepened, as though something beneath was pressing to get out. The second mouth didn't wait for me to move. It moved to me. The glow warped, the air bending in waves as the opening slid across the endless space, closing the distance without a sound. The heartbeat grew sharper, each pulse rattling my bones, even though I couldn't feel my body. I tried to push away. My hands meant nothing. The silhouettes stepped closer, their movements jerky, their limbs bending at angles I couldn't follow. Every step they took made the light throb. The mouth drew nearer. It wasn't made of teeth, it was made of doors, dozens of them, layered and shifting, their rusted metal plates grinding as they opened and closed without pattern. Behind some was only light, behind others, shadows, movement, eyes. The air around me pulled inward, tugging me toward it. One of the doors opened wider, just enough for me to see something lean through. It wasn't a face, it was a hand, long, jointed wrong, its pale fingers curling in a slow beckoning motion. The silhouettes all turned their heads toward that door. The mouth pulsed again, the hand reached farther. I felt my chest tighten, not from fear, but from something colder, recognition. That hand looked like mine. The hand hung in the glow, pale fingers twitching, the joints bending wrong each time they curled. I couldn't look away. The doors around it opened and shut in quick bursts, each one releasing flashes of places I half recognized. The clearing, the mound, the ranger station, all wrong somehow, as if I were looking at them from deep underwater. The hand moved closer. The pull in the air deepened, dragging me toward it. My body resisted at first, but the weightlessness was gone now. I felt heavy, like gravity had returned, but only to pull me toward the open door. The silhouettes stepped aside, clearing a path. They didn't move like they were making way for me. They moved like they were afraid. The hands, fingers spread wide. The closer I came, the more I realized the skin wasn't smooth. It was covered in marks, not scars. Names, carved into it, like the bark of a tree. My name was there, fresh. The door yawned wider, the hand retreating just enough to draw me in. The air rushed forward, pulling my body into motion. I tried to grab for something, anything, but there was nothing to hold. The light around me narrowed, the other doors snapping shut one by one until only the one before me remained open. The silhouettes tilted their heads one last time. The mouth pulsed, and I was pulled inside. The air vanished. For a moment there was nothing, no sound, no light, no weight. Then the floor returned, beneath my boots. It wasn't bone, it wasn't fabric, it wasn't fabric, it was soil. Damp, rich, alive. The light was gone. In its place stretched a forest that was somehow wrong. The trees towered higher than any I had seen in Yellowstone, their bark black as char, their leaves pale gray. They leaned toward me as though caught, mid-breath, frozen in the moment before speaking. There was no wind, but the branches swayed anyway. The heartbeat was here too, not distant now, not beneath my feet. It was everywhere. I took a step forward, and the soil shifted. My boot sank half an inch deeper than it should have. The ground gave beneath my weight, like I was walking on something hollow. I knelt, brushing away the thin layer of dirt. Fabric, the same fabric as before, packed into the ground, the sleeves and collars twisted like roots. I stepped back, my breath sharp in my chest. The forest ahead shifted. Between the black trunks, I saw movement, shapes sliding between the trees. They weren't the tall, thin silhouettes from before. These were hunched, crawling on limbs too long, their pale bodies streaked with the same marks as the hand that had pulled me in. They didn't come closer. They circled. Every step they took seemed to draw the trees tighter together, the trunks closing in like walls. A path formed ahead of me. It wasn't an invitation. It was the only direction left to go. The heartbeat quickened. The forest leaned closer, and I walked forward. The path wound forward, narrow enough that my shoulders brushed the black bark on either side. The pale leaves overhead rustled without wind, the sound dry and brittle, like old paper. The ground felt softer with each step, the soil giving way as though it were turning to ash beneath my boots. The crawling shapes never entered the path. They stayed at the edges. Circling, I could hear the faint drag of their limbs, the slow scrape of long fingers across the bark. The trees leaned closer. At first I thought it was just the path narrowing, but the trunks themselves shifted, their roots curling inward until the way ahead was no more than a tunnel of wood and pale leaves. The heartbeat deepened. I walked on, the sound pressing against my chest. It felt like hours, but the tunnel ahead never seemed to end. The light stayed the same, dim, pale, almost green. Then I realized the trees around me had stopped moving. The bark wasn't just black now. It was charred, cracked, and beneath the cracks, faint lines of rusted metal glinted in the dim light. I reached out and touched the surface. It wasn't wood anymore. It was cold. The heartbeat grew sharper, echoing from every direction. I stepped forward again, and the tunnel opened, not into a clearing, into a circle. The trees curved perfectly around me, their blackened trunks arched inward, forming a hollow space. The ground at the center was bare. The soil swept smooth, as if nothing had dared to grow here. There were no more crawling shapes, no more path, only the circle, and in the middle of it, half buried in the soil, was another door. This one was different. It wasn't rusted. It was alive. Its surface rose and fell with the heartbeat. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The door shifted on its own. The surface rippled faintly, as if a slow breath passed beneath it. The heartbeat synced with my own, each pulse making my chest feel tighter, heavier. I tried to take a step back, but the soil clung to my boots like wet clay. The door's edges began to stretch, not open, stretch. The outline of the frame elongated, the surface pulling upward like skin. Beneath the rise of the material, shapes moved, not the rigid silhouettes from before, but something softer, something closer. The heartbeats thudded again, louder this time, and the trees leaned in as though straining to hear. The door pulsed, once, twice, and then it spoke, not in words, in my voice. The sound was faint at first, as if someone far away was whispering into my ear. It wasn't just speaking, it was repeating. Every word I had said since entering the park, every scream, every scream, every question, every breath. The surface of the door bulged outward, the pulse growing frantic. The crawling shapes reappeared at the edges of the circle, their pale limbs dragging through the soil as they crouched low, heads turned toward the living surface. The heartbeat slammed again, and the bulge at the center of the door stretched until I could see the faint impression of fingers pressing from the other side. Not just pressing, pushing the surface of the living door. Strained, the shape beneath pressing harder, the outline of fingers stretching the skin thin. The sound of build out faster now, the door repeating everything at once, overlapping until the words became a rush of noise. The crawling shapes at the edge of the circle pressed themselves low into the soil. Their limbs splayed, wide, as if bracing for something. The door pulsed. The fingers pushed through. Not wood. Not metal. Not flesh. Something else. The pale surface split, without breaking. The material parting like water around the hand as it emerged. It wasn't the same hand as before. This one was larger. The marks carved in two. Its surface weren't just names. They were places. Big Bend, Yellowstone, Yosemite. The pulse slammed again, rattling my ribs. The door widened. I couldn't see what waited beyond it. Only the darkness that seemed deeper than any shadow I'd ever seen. The heartbeat wasn't coming from behind the door anymore. It was coming from inside my chest. The hand reached farther, and the soil beneath my boots began to shift, pulling me toward it. The soil shifted harder, every grain sliding toward the door. My boots dragged forward without my will. The hand reached, but it didn't grab me. It didn't have to. The forest moved. The black trunks groaned, the pale leaves twisting into spirals. The ground cracked open, thin lines tearing through the soil like veins. Beneath them I saw nothing. No roots, no stone, just a black void. The crawling shapes screeched in silence, their mouths opening wide, though no sound came out. They scrambled to the edge of the circle and pressed themselves against the trunks. The trees bent inward, their forms stretching taller, their branches splitting into countless finger-like shapes, all reaching toward the center. The air rippled. The circle itself was shrinking. The path I had walked was gone, folded inward as if it had never existed. The only space left was the hollow and the door at its heart. The hand retreated slightly into the living surface, and the pulse slowed, not weaker, just heavier. The door was waiting, but the forest was no longer still. The trunks began to split open, pale light spilling from their cores. Shapes moved inside, pressing against the glowing surface like insects beneath thin skin. One by one, the trunks tore, and pale figures began to step out. Not the crawling ones, not silhouettes. These looked human. The pale light poured from the split, trunks spilling across the circle in jagged lines. And then they stepped out. At first I thought they were rangers. Their clothes were tattered but familiar, faded uniforms and frayed boots caked with dirt. But their faces were wrong. They were too still, eyes fixed forward, unblinking, like masks that had been painted on. I recognized one of them. I didn't know how. I had never met him, but I had seen his picture tacked to a board at the ranger station under the word missing. His photograph had been faded, his name nearly worn away by time. He stepped into the circle without hesitation, his boots leaving no impression in the soil. More followed. Some were in hiking gear, their packs still strapped to their shoulders, the straps stiff as if molded into them. Others wore clothes that looked decades out of place, their colors drained until everything was the same pale shade. They formed a ring around me, facing inward, not toward the door, toward me. Their lips didn't move, but a sound rose from them, all at once. It wasn't a voice, it was the heartbeat. I staggered back, my own chest pounding in rhythm, each thud matching theirs until the sound was one endless pulse. The hand from the door extended again, curling upward as if beckoning me forward. The lost ones didn't step closer. They didn't have to. The circle was smaller now, and the only space left was between me and the door. The hand didn't grab me. It lowered, pressing its palm flat against the soil. The heartbeat slammed once, and the ground shuddered. The lost ones moved, not with their feet. Their bodies shifted like water, the pale surface of their skin rippling as though something beneath was trying to push its way out. Their faces bent. First, the unblinking masks' twisted eyes, sliding to new positions, mouths stretching wider than they should. I stepped back, but there was nowhere to go. The circle had tightened again. Behind them, the black trunks leaned forward until they formed a wall. The pale light from the split bark pulsed in rhythm with the heartbeat. The lost ones tilted their heads in unison, the motion smooth, unnatural. And then the door exhaled. A rush of cold air swept across the circle, carrying with it the smell of wet soil, rust, and something older. The surface of the door split not open like wood, but parting as though the material were alive, folding itself back. Inside was no room, no tunnel. It was a void, but not empty. Shapes moved within the darkness, enormous and slow, their forms half seen, as if the shadows themselves were alive. The lost ones stepped aside, leaving the path between me and the door clear. The hand rose again, curling its fingers toward me, and the pulse in my chest became one with the sound beyond the threshold. The void was breathing. The void filled the circle. I could feel it breathing. Every inhale pulling me forward, every exhale holding me still, just long enough to feel the weight of what waited. The lost ones didn't move. They didn't have to. The forest leaned closer, the black trunks curving until their tops met overhead, sealing out the sky. The pale light from their split bark dimmed, leaving only the glow from the door. My boots slid forward. The soil no longer held me back. It guided me. The hand retreated into the surface, vanishing into the shifting dark. Something larger pressed forward. A shape filled the doorway, its edges indistinct, its form moving like a tide. For a moment, I thought I saw a face my own before it dissolved into shadow again. The heartbeat grew so loud it drowned my thoughts. The ground vanished beneath my feet. The cold wrapped around me, not like water or wind, but like the soil itself had risen to take me back. I reached for air that wasn't there. The void inhaled one last time, and I stepped into it. The door closed without a sound. The circle was empty. The forest was still. The heartbeat stopped. Big Bend National Park waited quietly, as though nothing had happened.